Hello, this is Colleen, and I was fortunate enough to be put in a group with two dynamic peers, Gina and Danielle. We were charged with presenting the cons of organizing our libraries by genre. Well, that was probably the unfortunate part. But here's our attempt to tell you why the Dewey Decimal System is superior to organizing by genre. To understand the organization of a library and how that organization best serves its patron is a starting point to this topic of whether to organize strictly by the Dewey Decimal System or to organize by genre. On the left here, you can see that the Dewey Decimal System is the most widely used way to classify books in a library, and to change it at this point would be a challenge. No one likes change after all. And you can see on the right side here, genreifying is somewhat like how a bookstore might do it so that they attract people to certain genres. The Dewey is really only for the nonfiction section as far as categorizing the books, because the fiction books are alphabetized by author's last name. Genres would be used predominantly for fiction books, and how in the world would we decide every genre for every fictional book? I'm currently reading a book right now that has an octopus as one of its main characters, and it actually narrates chapters by itself, while the rest of the book is all people. So, what genre would that be? Or how about the book in the everyone section that has the dinosaur going to school? Would we put the book under dinosaurs or under schools? Would that be the genre of which one? Like, how would we decide? A huge con of categorizing by genres is that the books don't really fit into a certain genre. But if we leave the fiction in alphabetical order, at least there is a method to finding all of the books, rather than us guessing which genre the librarian chose to put the books in. The history of the library system versus the present. So, the Dewey Decimal System, students certainly already know, and they are already consistently using that in their libraries currently. Using the Dewey Decimal System allows all libraries across the world to have a consistent and standard way to find books. There is definitely something to be said for a standard, systematic way to organize a library. Whereas genrefication is rather new age for libraries to move away from the Dewey Decimal System. While genrefication does have its pros, it is not always the better option. One of the reasons genrefication of a collection is difficult is because determining which books go where is opinion based. Quote, loose parameters make it hard to judge which genre a book should be placed in, especially when some books can have more than one genre category. What makes sense to one librarian may not be the same for another. End quote. This was the Do We or Don't We article we read. This would make it difficult for students to determine where the books are, especially for topics that may fit in more than one genre. So, to be in the stacks or to be in the books, well, the problem is that students only finding books that they enjoy by genre is that they never leave that genre. Or maybe they want to find books by their favorite author, but they don't know that that author writes in different genres. So navigating the stacks may be difficult at first when students are first learning the Dewey Decimal System, but it does give students more of a variety when learning and determining what type of books they may be interested in. The Dewey Decimal System is also more beneficial for research projects as it allows students to find specifics of fiction and nonfiction texts. And I know in the elementary school, the students certainly need to be told when a book is nonfiction versus when it's fiction, because they always assume all books are fiction. Limits versus limitless. So, organization is an essential part of any successful library system. And while there is truly no right or wrong answer when it comes to how a librarian organizes their collection, an approach with limits is really the best. The limitless approach of genreifying is ideal in theory, but may hinder a reader's intellectual freedom. Oh, I went too far. Sorry about that. Reteaching. So, who wants to teach and reteach and reteach? We find ourselves as teachers reteaching often, and to change the entire library would take years of teaching and reteaching as to where we had put the books. If school and public libraries have the same organization, there will be no need to reteach students how to use each library that they enter. Using the Dewey system, students will have a universal knowledge of how a library was organized. A genrefication system in the library is set up according to each librarian's discretion, and therefore it would be every time the patrons came in, we would have to be explaining what we were doing in that library. Snipe states the problem is that the new system is subjective to the creator. It makes sense to the person organizing the library and is essentially takes us back to the days before Dewey, where every library was organized however that librarian saw fit. End of the quote from Snipes. So librarians will need to determine the genre of books and select which genre should be available. Students coming to the library for the first time, though, would definitely struggle to complete research, for example, because they would not know where to look for the books. In secondaries, with secondary students that are in a school with a genrefied library, they would not be exposed to the Dewey system, for example, or the Library of Congress system, and therefore may struggle when they get into college because they would have a system, most likely. So fiction, nonfiction, or both, which one are you going to genrefy? Or are you genrefying all of it? I gave you a little joke here at the bottom. Can you imagine going to the grocery store and the things to make lasagna, for example, all being together, including the extras like the bread and the salad, or the things for tacos all being together, or the things for a cookout all being together? It would be great to some degree, but what if I only needed lettuce? God forbid if I sent my husband to the store, I would never get the lettuce unless, of course, he was able to guess which meal that the lettuce was categorized with. This would be an ongoing debate. The same thing in the library system with genreification. Should it only be in the fiction section that they generify, or should it be applied to the nonfiction side as well? Many librarians think it is easier to use genreification in fiction section only, which does raise the question of why have the library organized in two different ways. Libraries should have one organizational method, in my opinion, to ensure students are able to effectively find books throughout the entire library. The Dewey system was initially embraced because it created a universal organizational system across all libraries and across the country, really. Without the Dewey system, there is not a constant form of organization in the libraries. So, is there enough time and space? Well, there's never enough time as in a school system, if you ask me, but is there enough space? No, there's not that either. So, is there enough space in the library media center for genreification? Our answer is no. For libraries to be set up based on genre, the librarian would need to select from a vast variety of fiction genres, which base books should be shelved where and how they should be shelved and all that, and which ones should be next to each other, and the list goes on and on. It's like one thing triggers another thing. And the process of genreification is not simple at all. Librarians would first have to commit to the genreification because it will take time to set up. And many librarians have stated that it takes like close to a year, if not more, to get their entire library in the genre system. The school librarian already has a full load of classes to teach, and they have their circulation duties, not to mention the Chromebooks and the iPads in some schools that they have to keep track of, and the robots and all the other things that we have to keep track of. It really would be a huge undertaking to try to switch over from Dewey to genres in our libraries. And of course, as I said over and over again, librarians would also have to determine which genre they would put each book in. And that, of course, leads to other problems, especially if that librarian is maybe they're not going to be there for long. And so if they put the things in a certain genre, the next librarian comes in and it doesn't seem logical to the next librarian. So that would make an issue as well. And that, my friends, is all we've got. And we appreciate your time and listening to our cons and how we think we should just stick with the Dewey Decimal.